Listening, fill in the blanks.
Let's start.
Of particular concern in this era was the introduction of pitons, metal spikes that climbers hammer into the rock face for leverage, and the use of belaying techniques. A few, such as Italian climber Guido Rei, supported these methods as ways to render climbing less burdensome and more acrobatic. Others felt that they were only of value as a safety net if all else failed. Austrian Paul Preuss went so far as to eschew all artificial aids, scaling astonishing heights using only his shoes and his bare hands. Albert Mummery, a well-known British mountaineer and author who climbed the European Alps and, more famously, the Himalayas, where he died at the age of 39, attempting a notoriously difficult ascent, developed the notion of fair means as a kind of informal protocol by which the use of walk-through guidebooks and equipment such as ladders and grappling hooks were discouraged.
Climbing purists aside, it was not until the 1970s that the general tide began to turn against bolting and pitons. The USA, and much of the Western world, was waking up to the damage it had been causing to the planet, and environmentalist campaigns and new government policies were becoming widespread. This new awareness and sensitivity to environmental issues spilled over into the rock climbing community. As a result, a stripped-down style of rock climbing known as clean climbing became widely adopted. Clean climbing helped preserve rock faces and, compared with older approaches, it was much simpler to practice. This was partly due to the hallmark of clean climbing, the use of nuts, which were favored over bolts because they could be placed into the rock wall with one hand while climbers maintained their grip on the rock with the other.
The first hydroelectric power plants were much more dependable and efficient than the plants of the day that were fired by fossil fuels. This led to a rise in the number of small to medium-sized hydroelectric generating plants located wherever there was an adequate supply of falling water and a need for electricity. As demand for electricity soared in the middle years of the 20th century, and the effectiveness of coal and oil power plants improved, small hydro plants became less popular. The majority of new hydroelectric developments were focused on giant mega projects.
The much-publicized pronouncement by painter Paul Delaroche that the daguerreotype asterisk signaling the end of painting is perplexing because this clever artist also forecast the usefulness of the medium for graphic artists in a letter written in 1839. Nevertheless, it is symptomatic of the swing between the outright rejection and qualified acceptance of the medium that was fairly typical of the artistic establishment. Discussion of the role of photography in art was especially spirited in France, where the internal policies of the time had created a large pool of artists, but it was also taken up by important voices in England.
At the age of 13, Miles Davis was given his first trumpet. Lessons were arranged with a local trumpet player, and a musical odyssey began. These early lessons, paid for and supported by his father, had a profound effect on shaping Davis' signature sound. Whereas most trumpeters of the era favored the use of vibrato, a wobbly quiver, in pitch inflected in the instrument's tone, Davis was taught to play with a long, straight tone, a preference his instructor reportedly drilled into the young trumpeter, with a rap on the knuckles every time Davis began using vibrato. This clear, distinctive style never left Davis. He continued playing with it for the rest of his career, once remarking, "If I can't get that sound, I can't play anything."
Without the use of animals or wheels, to massive stone platforms. The identity of the Moai builders was in doubt until well into the 20th century. Thor Heyerdahl, the Norwegian ethnographer and adventurer, thought the statues had been created by pre-Inca peoples from Peru. Best-selling Swiss author Erich von Däniken believed they were built by stranded extraterrestrials. Modern science, linguistic, archaeological, and genetic evidence has definitively proved the Moai builders were Polynesians, but not how they moved their creations. Local folklore maintains that the statues walked, while researchers have tended to assume the ancestors dragged the statues somehow, using ropes and logs.
Not everyone was supportive of Davis' change of tune compared to the recordings of his early career. Universally applauded as linchpins of the jazz oeuvre, trumpeter Winston Marsalis derided his fusion work as being not true jazz, and pianist Bill Evans denounced the corrupting influence of record companies, noting that rock and pop draw wider audiences. In the face of this criticism, Davis remained defiant, commenting that his earlier recordings were part of a moment in time that he had no feel for anymore. He firmly believed that remaining stylistically inert would have hampered his ability to develop new ways of producing music. From this perspective, Davis' continual revamping of genre was not merely a rebellion, but an evolution, a necessary path that allowed him to release his full musical potential.
Most of the world-scale pulp mills in Scandinavia and North America have modernized their operations, outlaying substantial amounts to improve production methods. Changes in mill design and processes have been aimed at minimizing the environmental effects of effluent discharge, while at the same time producing pulp with the whiteness and strength demanded by the international market. The environmental impetus is taking this industry even further, with the focus now on developing processes that may even eliminate wastewater discharges. But the ghost of the old mills continues to haunt industry today. In Europe, companies face a flood of environment-related legislation. In Germany, companies are now being held responsible for the waste they create.
Ever since its debut at the Paris Salon of 1882, art historians have produced reams of books and journal articles disputing the positioning of the barmaid and patron in a bar at the Folies. Some have even conducted staged representations of the painting in order to ascertain whether Manet's seemingly distorted point of view might have been possible after all. Yet while academics are understandably drawn to the compositional enigma of the painting, the layperson is always likely to see the much simpler, more human story beneath. No doubt this is the way Manet would have wanted it.
Even more confounding than Manet's relaxed attention to detail, however, is the relationship in the painting between the activity in the mirrored reflection and that which we see in the unreflected foreground. In a similar vein to Diego Velázquez's much earlier work Las Meninas, Manet uses the mirror to toy with our ideas about which details are true to life and which are not. In the foreground, for example, the barmaid is positioned upright, her face betraying an expression of lonely detachment, yet in the mirrored reflection she appears to be leaning forward and to the side, apparently engaging in conversation with her mustachioed customer. As a result of this, the customer's stance is also altered. In the mirror, he should be blocked from view as a result of where the barmaid is standing, yet Manet has repositioned him to the side.
Like, share, subscribe the channel, and press the bell icon for further updates.